Frank Corrado, former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst. How you doing, fella?
And former avid golfer before Twins.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
He used to golf.
Yeah, used to golf, former golfer, future golfer at some point again. Caught somewhere in the middle. Actually played 18 yesterday. First time playing 18 since Rimouski at the Memorial Cup. My play has been, I've played 9 holes 5 times. And those 5 times have occurred either during nap time, so get them down for the nap race to the course, or like in June after bedtime, get them down at like 7:15, race to the course, play 9 by myself, race through it.
Yeah.
Anyways, had it on the books, played 18, not bad, shot 79. And
Very nice.
drove the ball kind of crappy, but irons and short game were good, so it kind of made up for it. Weird, that's not usually the way my game is.
Reverse.
It was a bizarro round, yeah.
We want to talk some Vancouver Canucks with you, and we want to talk about a guy who is heading your way, Frank, to the city of Toronto and the Maple Leafs. Dakota Joshua talked this week, and he talked about how he is excited to get back playing for head coach Craig Berube. And, of course, Craig was the head coach of the St. Louis Blues in 2020 and 2021-22 when Dakota Joshua first started dipping toe in the National Hockey League. What do you think? Does Joshua fit the Berube system? Does the Berube system fit Dakota Joshua?
It very much does. And I think Toronto very much needs a player like Dakota Joshua. And not just one player, because Toronto in the past has kind of been guilty of saying, like, we have a guy who plays physical and with an edge, and they need more of that. But where Dakota Joshua comes in is, like, he's a bit of a temperature changer in a game, as you guys know, right? Like willing to be confrontational, willing to agitate, and not the second one to arrive to the party to do it. Like can be the first guy on the scene to do it, which is not something that typically happens for the Maple Leafs. And as far as how they, Toronto's tried to play different with Craig Berube, with Sheldon Keefe, there was a little more, like puck possession is just a bland term now, but there was a little more, let's bring it back. Let's go side to side. Let's not, let's get it off the wall as quick as possible. And sometimes that would lead to some like higher risk plays that would get turned over. With Berube, it is a little more just like straight up, chip it, go get it. And let's not force it off the yellow dasher if we don't have to. Let's be more comfortable playing on the outside of the ice, and when we have the opportunity, we'll bring it in. So, like Dakota Joshua is going to fit what they're trying to do, and gives them a little more meat that they would definitely covet and need.
Everything you said is
healthy,
true.
though.
Everything you said is true and is possible. But I would say the biggest issue is going to be getting that consistency. He's not as good as Alex Edler was, but Alex Edler could play with the elite players in the NHL on defense when he was on, when he had it all going. But Canuck fans were forever imploring him to bring that physicality, that edge all the time, and it wasn't necessarily always there. Dakota Joshua's got to find a way to find his A game just a little bit more frequently, I think. And playing for Berube, that's the kind of coach that might be able to bring it out. But I would have thought that of Rick Tocchet as well, and it didn't happen last year.
Last year, I would almost say that last year, I'm not going to say it's a write-off. You can't just discard a whole year, but it did have...
Yeah.
It's like an asterisk year, right? With what he was going through personally and what the team was going through. But if they get the Dakota Joshua from 2 years ago, where Rick Tocchet was hard on him and really pushed him and challenged him, and Craig Berube will be very willing to do that, then I think it's a smart move for Toronto. The other thing that comes to mind with him and the Leafs is, like, there's not going to be there shouldn't be anyways, any kind of identity crisis as far as what he's supposed to be on that team. Even though Mitch Marner is gone, it's always like, these are the skill guys, these are the other guys. Mm-hmm. It still is like that, even though Marner's gone, but I guess that has its flaws, but at the same time, you can have a very defined role on that team and know that no one's asking you to do Nylander's job or Matthew Knies' job or Tavares' job. You got to do Dakota Joshua's job and do it well, because they're a good team. Like, are they going to be a 108-point team again next year? I don't think so. Maybe they are, but I could see them being 101 102 point team, realistically. And if he plays his role well, then they will benefit greatly because they need someone to play the Dakota Joshua role. Nothing more, and obviously nothing less, but he just has to be who he is or who he can be when he's at his best.
Are they ecstatic with 15 goals out of Dakota
If
Joshua?
they get 15 goals out of a depth player, they're doing jumping jacks.
Right.
Like, no, and that's a bit of an exaggeration, but like that area of the lineup, that number of goals has been tough to come by because they haven't been able to get, they have the $13 million player, the $11 million players. They've never had the $5, $6, $7 million players. And Dakota Joshua was just over 3. But he kind of represents that like middle ground where you should be able to get 15 goals. And for him, like he should be able to get in there and realize this is the thing Dakota Joshua has to do more than anything in Toronto is realize when the game is not to Toronto's liking and it's dull and it's sleepy, and provide some kind of spark in the game. And it doesn't have to be a fight, doesn't have to put someone through the boards, but he has to do something to get some kind of life in that bench, which he is capable of doing.
We ran a clip a couple of weeks back of the coaches site where there was a little round table, Travis Green, Rick Tocchet, and Craig Berube. And Green was really leading the conversation, and they were discussing having to tailor your system to the personnel you have at hand as opposed to trying to get players who aren't particularly adept or equipped to play your system, vice versa. And Berube made a comment about, dumping it in, but I'm not going to tell Austin Matthews to dump it in. We had that great debate all of last year with Rick Tocchet. Frank, where do you think NHL coaches are these days in terms of allowing the skill players, the exceptional players, to sort of have more freedom and play as they choose, as opposed to having to play strictly with a system? Because that's one of the big questions here for Elias Pettersson with regards to Adam Foote and a new head coach who we don't really know how he's going to want to play, but we know that Tocchet tried to reprogram him, and we know that wasn't very successful, trying to make Elias a north-south player.
The league is the best or more conducive it's ever been to players being free to be who they are. And that's because the skill has gone to a whole other level, like individually, but I think just the quantity of players that are skilled and can make plays, there's more now than there, like the volume of it is just more than it was in the past. And so now you're in a situation where if you want to operate as a coach by essentially taking the puck out of all your skilled players' hands and saying, you got to dump it, like this many times, you're dumbing, like I've said this before to you guys, you're just dumbing things down. And all of a sudden, your guys that are difference makers or your guys that are game breakers, they're not as much anymore because you're taking the puck out of their hands. So, yeah, there's a time and place for everything. There's a time and place for a guy like Pettersson or Austin Matthews to dump the puck and go in and hunt it on the forecheck. But it doesn't have to be the only thing you do. It's just a recognition of what's the other team doing to you. Are they trying to stand you up at the red line so you have no room? Well, in that case, don't turn it over. Like, go chip it and get it, right? Like, so I think you do have to, as a coach now, give the players some leeway to make mistakes because it's going to happen, some autonomy, some ownership over what they do. And, ultimately, if they keep turning the puck over and if it's not going well, then, yeah, you have every right as a coach to kind of flex your muscle and assert yourself. But you do have to understand who you got and what their strengths are and what they're good at. And, I think if you look at all those coaches that you just mentioned, like it's okay for Travis Green to tell Tim Stützle, hey, sometimes you got to dump it in and go get it. But that doesn't have to be the thing you do every time. And it's okay for Craig Berube to tell Austin Matthews, hey, when you get the puck on the hash marks on the wall, like you don't have to just force it into the middle of the ice. It's okay for you to stick your ass out and protect it and lean on someone, right? Like it's okay to coach still. But, coaching goes both ways. You still have to allow these guys to showcase the skills that make them difference makers.
And rounding back to Joshua, our Whistler Golf Club poll question today, Frank, Which trade do you think the Canucks will regret? Joshua, she loves, neither, both. What says you?
I think the Joshua one more than the Shelovs one, because they're still pretty well hedged in net. And I would have said the player as opposed to the goaltender. Well, maybe not in every situation. Like if Demko was the goalie that moved, I wouldn't have said that. But like Joshua's just a different guy. Like keep in mind, Vancouver brought in Evander Kane, and Evander Kane plays a robust power forward style of game. And he's got plenty of skill and he's got plenty of game still. So maybe that'll soften the loss of Dakota Joshua. It probably should. But there's just not a lot of guys really that are like when Joshua was at his best 2 years ago, when he was playing on the line with Bluger and Garland. That's a guy in a different way. He's a difference maker. He's not like the upper echelon type difference maker, but like I said earlier, a guy who can change the temperature of the game and frustrate you with what he's doing away from the puck, and then frustrate you because he can actually score, and kind of finish the job. And Shelovs is still working his way through the NHL process. Could end up being a great goaltender, could eventually go back to the AHL. Who knows? Like, you just don't know. But I think from what I've seen out of the best of Dakota Joshua, he's the guy that if he goes and flourishes in Toronto, you're like, yeah, we would miss that element for sure.
But given the Canucks needs, that second line center gaping hole that we've talked about, if I'm the GM of the Canucks and you told me Joshua's going to get 15 goals next year, which you say is great for him and for the Leafs, I would still say I'm okay with that for the 3 years off the cap and 3.25 whatever it is. I'm willing to make that sacrifice for the greater good of the lineup in terms of opening up space for the center ice position. Doesn't that make sense too?
Yeah. I listen,
a win-win, really.
It for sure. And ultimately, if you get your guy that you think is going to be your second line center, you needed to alleviate the cap space. You have to pull the trigger at some point, right? Yeah. And I think we always, when we have these conversations, we talk about players on the perimeters of the lineup, even though second line centers, right down the middle. It kind of hinges on what 40 is going to do still. Like, so Elias Pettersson still has to be, somewhat dominant, be a guy who can take over a game, and get back to his form. If that doesn't happen, then we're just kind of talking in circles about this guy in, that guy out, cap space here. Like, it kind of begins and ends there. Because if it doesn't happen there, you're problem solving at the higher part of your lineup, and that's just not something you need to be dealing with when you're trying to make the playoffs.
Should the Canucks be salivating that Marco Rossi and Bill Guerin still aren't talking? It doesn't seem like it's imminent or close in any way, shape, or form.
You know what's interesting? I was doing Ottawa radio yesterday, and they asked me about Marco Rossi with the Canadiens. Mm-hmm. And the question was, does it make sense for a team like the Canadiens? And I said no. Even though I think Marco Rossi's a good player, I don't think it makes sense for the Canadiens because Nick Suzuki's not big, Marco Rossi's not big, and you'd be attaching yourself to those two guys in what is your window now to try and compete, right? Like, all these guys are going to be entering their prime. I said it makes sense for two types of teams. Either you're just a really bad team, like who needs a centerman, or you're a team that's like, I guess just desperate for a centerman. Like, you need a centerman so badly. And I think Vancouver falls into that category. No, sorry, I messed that up. Here it is again. You either have a big, like, top line centerman, and you feel like having a smaller Marco Rossi mitigates, the size discrepancy as your second line guy, or you're a team that just needs a centerman so badly, and that's Vancouver. Those are the two categories. Sorry. And for me, like, I wouldn't be so concerned as opposed to in Montreal if you're going Suzuki Rossi, going Pettersson Rossi, because I think the whole for Vancouver is somewhat greater as far as like they need to have a centerman pretty soon. And I think Montreal can wait a little bit and see if Michael Hage is a guy or whoever becomes available. And they just, so if I'm Vancouver, the longer this plays out in Minnesota, I think the more chance there would be that you could try and get something done.
We had a good debate last week about, given the competition for a top 2 center, should the Canucks put DPD, Elias Pettersson in play, if that's what's going to
move the needle.
Yeah.
Could be. Like, it could be. I think with the back end, you're at a position of strength right now. It is funny, though, that some of your strength is at the position that teams don't generally have, right-handed defensemen. Like with Wielander and Mancini, you feel like you're pretty set for the future on the right-hand side. And then if you move a lefty, like most teams would have probably a left-handed defenseman prospect to spare. Vancouver's guy to spare is likely on the right-hand side if you're looking at it that way for quantity. Mm-hmm. But I think it's all going to depend what a team wants. Like if they're calling, you got to weigh that option and see, does this actually make sense for us?
And it brings up a good question, Frank. Like, who's more valuable? Elias Pettersson, having played in the National Hockey League, looked really good, played a physical game, played so well that they didn't even dispatch him back to Abbotsford for the Calder Cup run, or Tom Wielander, sight on scene in the NHL with that first-round draft pick, right side.
Because he's on the right side. Yeah.
I still would think it's Wielander. Yeah. I still would think the higher end upside for what he can be, right-handed shot. I think that's a harder commodity to come by. But you have to keep in mind, like you have Mancini. But at the same time, you don't just move a guy just to move a guy because you think the other player is going to be an insurance policy. Like if this organization ever decided they were going to move Wielander, I would say the return has to be so astronomical at this point because you just don't know what he could be. He could be a 15-year, like 25-minute per game stud on both sides of the puck.
Yeah,
and you just don't know that yet. So I think that's why maybe you could get the most, but that's also why you would have to get something astronomical to do it.
All right, buddy, we're going to release you to the golf course or to the Twins, whichever takes priority right now. Thank you for this, Frank. Have a great week. Catch up next Wednesday.
Boys. Okay, have a good one.